I'll go ahead and look at the questions that we have in the chat. So Chris says, Cedric, I have a question for later that might be beyond the scope of this class. How does CCNE bring about awakening? Or enlightenment? That's how I'm reading your question. So let's just jump into that. So how should I approach this? So firstly, I just want to say that all right, so awakening, enlightenment, I basically would say that I believe that they are real, but then I also kind of want to back off the statement just a bit and say that when there is some level of awakening, some level of enlightenment, I think often it's accompanied by a fuzzing out of boundaries in a certain aspect. And so the boundaries between real and not real actually get fuzzed out, which I think is largely a function of sensory clarity. And then here we're already speaking to your question, Chris, that I think if you get enough sensory clarity, you notice that nothing has a discrete self and nothing has a discrete like boundary around it, right? Everything is fuzzy. So on some level, to kind of, well, let me not go there. So I just want to say that let's not get too caught up in awakening being real or not real, because when there's enough development, you let go of the hard distinction between real and not real. Okay, that was my little preface. So how does developing concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity help you awaken? So the way I would put it is this: concentration, I think concentration in some ways is the most instrumental, in a sense, almost like non-essential, but it's of tremendous instrumental value. It helps you simply gather the mind and hold your attention on something, which you can't get anywhere, in a sense, if you can't just hold your attention on what is arising for you. And then let me back up and make another contextualizing statement that in Buddhism, and I think largely in all contemplative practice, we really take a phenomenological approach. We like look at the sensory level of things, and not that we get to an objective sensory level at any point, but just this kind of more phenomenological approach. Once we get deeply kind of, I don't know how to say this, like habituated into that way of seeing, then everything's like sensory. And then if everything's sensory, God, I don't know how to explain this. When everything is experienced as sensory, then thoughts are experienced as sensory events as well. And when a thought is seen as a sensory event, belief of a thought makes zero sense. It's like this. Listen, you hear this? Do you believe it or do you not believe it? Okay, watch my hand. Are you believing your experience or are you not believing it? Are you believing the visual experience or are you not believing the visual experience? And the answer is, the question makes no sense. Like, what the hell am I even saying? So in that same way, when thought is experienced on a sense at a sensory level, the whole pressure to believe or disbelieve a thought, view a thought as true or false, or even thinking that reality can be understood via thought in some sort of absolute way, all that collapses. And so firstly, that is an aspect of awakening, I think. Also, now coming back to your question, that is one way in which sensory clarity, I would say, brings about awakening. Because if you actually see your sensory experience as sensory experience instead of, in a sense, believing the dream, right? Then that's awakening. And so that's how sensory clarity helps that. Now let's go on to equanimity. Equanimity, and Shinzen Young says this, and I think I agree as well. Of the three, equanimity is the most important. What does equanimity mean? It means not pushing or pulling on your sensory experience. It means just being at peace with the way that things are. And as it develops more and more, it's an unconditional peace. Okay, good. How does that bring about awakening? I think that, and this is just kind of what's coming up for me right now. This is not, obviously, I didn't prepare for this question, but equanimity brings about awakening because, in a sense, I think it allows for concentration and it allows for sensory clarity. Because if you kind of push something away or cling to it, you can't really concentrate on it or observe it. So equanimity is the precondition for insight. You can't see the thing unless you can manage to be sufficiently undisturbed by the thing such that you can then continue to maintain your attention on it. That's what's coming up right now. I think there's a lot of other really good answers to your question, but that's what's coming up right now. Okay, let's just move on to the next couple of comments, and then also, Chris, here in a minute, just bring up any more questions that are coming up. It's a really super cool question. And also, let me just say this, that I would recommend that you all approach your practice with the intention of awakening. It's kind of a waste if you don't. I think there's some legit kind of benefits to doing meditation, even if you don't awaken, but I mean, by God, go for awakening. Why the hell not? All right. Chris says, I've listened to maybe 5 of the 20 hours of the Shinzen's Old Science of Enlightenment audiobook, and while I found a few insightful nuggets, I'm afraid 99% of it is going over my head. Okay, I can't speak to that. I read the book, but I don't really remember it. Rory says, I have the feeling that feel rest is a practice most suited to retreat conditions or a series of sits. It does not seem to, hold up. It does not seem to be one that suits my daily routine, either morning sits or midday slots. It works well on the before bed sits. I tried. Okay, well, you know, I don't necessarily think that. Well, firstly, Rory, I like how you're just figuring out what works for you. And I think what you're describing here is totally cool. Like, to be clear, you don't need to do the feel rest technique. I do like it, and it has influenced my practice tremendously. But you should do what works for you. And like, for example, people that really struggle with like dullness or falling asleep, this would probably not be a very good practice. So again, you're kind of developing ownership around your practice, so that's good. That's what I'm going to say here. All right. Jesus says, feel rest is great. I like it a lot. During the meditation, I mostly find sensations of relaxation with a cool and fresh quality that get bigger and more widespread towards the end of the 30 minutes. It's also great to do before bed. It seems to improve the quality of sleep. When I do feel rest at night, I get very sleepy and my head falls a lot, but thanks to the advice of paying attention to sleepy feelings, it's interesting instead of frustrating. Oh, that is awesome. That is great. I'm really happy to hear that. Jesus. Feel rest is going to be one of my main practices. Okay, fantastic report. That sounds really good. And I love, it's a kind of a very Vajrayana approach of, turning poison into medicine. Like, I like this, how you've managed to reframe sleepiness and dullness as a kind of special opportunity for insight and special opportunity for practice. That is excellent. Okay, cool. What else is coming up for people? Yeah, any questions or comments about anything that was said or this last week of practice?
Hey, how you doing, Cedric? It's
Hey,
Matt.
man. Yep.
Hey. So I mean, mine might kind of leak into what we're going to talk about, general practice stuff,
Uh huh.
but
That's fine.
as you're aware, I kind of struggled for a little bit. I
Yep.
wasn't expecting. I didn't realize like how attached I got to the daily normal feelings that I was feeling during quarantine and
Yep.
alone, and how that was kind of pushing me into meditation more and more. And I went and I hung out with like my best friend who I spent almost
Mm.
5 years every day with. And I
Mm.
got so comfortable that it just started slipping my mind. Every other time I was doing the mindfulness throughout the day and the informal practice,
Right.
and everything just slipped a little, and I kind of let it because I got so comfortable. And my question would be more about like how to navigate that type of stuff because I didn't foresee it, and then it kind of just hit me, and then I kind of fell off, and then I start bad thinking like that it's like some type of accumulative thing, or I feel like I've lost something because I no longer have multiple days in a row or anything kind of silly like that. But just around that type of thinking, like how to think properly about it instead of thinking less skillful and less mature about it.
Okay. Um, so I think there's a lot of threads there. Let me just see if I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're saying, hey, you really you got going with meditation during quarantine. You got a lot of benefits from it. You think it's maybe helped you manage some of the loneliness, isolation, etc. Now, just recently, you hung out with your friend like all day long. It was really good for you. You kind of really eased some stress. It was fun, but you found it distracting and you didn't get your meditation in. Now you're a little bit concerned of like, oh my gosh, I've lost my momentum. Oh, I'm worried about things going forward. How should I think about this to get back on the horse? Am I getting it right? And is there more?
Yeah, it's that, but it's essentially like I don't know, like I feel like I lost something. Like I feel like I let myself down and I beat myself up about it, and that also like comes up when I go to meditate. Like that's the initial like I don't know if it's ego or what it is, but I'll be like I should go meditate, and then I think like, well, you haven't done it in a day or two. Are you really in it? It's just a bunch of weird doubts that start coming up because I don't have that momentum. So I guess like the more crux of the question is like maybe how to view momentum in the right way, or if that is really a thing, and am I really losing out? I don't know, just stuff like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
okay. So again, there's a lot going on there as well. But like, let's see here. So, firstly, momentum is absolutely a real thing, and if you have like an ongoing practice and you're meditating every single day, it will build. And also, not meditating daily happens. And what I'd also recommend, and this is completely drawing from the kind of mundane world, ignore sunk costs. So like literally the first and in a sense possibly last lesson that a good economics teacher should like start and end the class with is ignore sunk costs, ignore sunk costs. So let's just say you did a lot of terrible things yesterday. Okay, learn your lessons and move on. And also actually in a sense that is central to the practice. The practice, I mean, it's many, many things, but one of the things that it is it helps you stay present, be in the now, quit ruminating, and like realistically assess what is up in this moment. Like right now, you have the choice to be awake or to be asleep. Like for example, let's all right now note. Like I'm gonna keep talking, and I want you to not listen to what I'm saying, but like just note here. I'm talking, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking, blah, blah, blah. And we're all just noticing that I'm talking. So this is a moment of being awake. And now, 2 weeks ago, we, let's just say all of us forgot to practice. Well, we just completely let that go. And it's like, there's a kind of, well, this is an interesting way to put it. There is, like, firstly, actually intelligence and anxiety are positively correlated. And actually, if you think about it, anxiety is a type of intelligence. It's like, you really think, it's like this, like, interesting cognitive act. It's like you're thinking about all these problems. And in a sense, now we want the capability to think and maybe even the capability to feel some anxiety when it's appropriate. We want to maintain that to some extent. But in a sense, and I'm kind of being a little bit playing with the language here, but in a sense, the practice is about becoming stupid to that. It's like about like not even knowing what the hell worry would mean. It's like, oh, here's the impulse to worry. And it's like, I don't even know what the hell that means. And then it just collapses by itself when you quit. Geez, and I don't really know how to explain it. I think it really hinges on the equanimity aspect, is that you sit with your practice. Also, in practice, you have a lot of difficult experiences. And that is like, that's similar to like lifting the heavy weights. And then, you're in the gym, you're really focusing on the weight training, and it's a strain. And then 2 weeks later, you're like picking up like a water container, a 5-gallon water container, and putting it on a shopping cart. And you're like, wow, that was so much easier. So in that same way, in the practice, you learn these equanimity skills that help you drop anxiety when it arises. So I think that's something I would mention. Also, and then I think it's kind of good to come in and have take multiple perspectives, and even at times contradictory perspectives, which is useful from a place of like looking at things in a diverse way, and also through, and this is very, I don't know if anybody's going to catch this, but it's helpful to look at things through different perspectives because it undermines the very notion of truth. Like if you really can see things a bunch of different ways, you're like, holy shit, I can't find any truth. And that really helps drop the level of anxiety in your life, because you know that there's no right solution for your life anyway, but I'm getting a bit distracted. So coming back, so again, we're taking this kind of multiple different approaches. So let me just say this, Matt, that connecting with others, having meaningful and nourishing experiences with others is very, very healthy. Like I was reading an article recently, and it said that your social network is like one of the best predictors for resilience around stress and mental health problems, and also one of the best predictors for recovery from mental health issues. So I just want to say that it's good to do one of my old teachers used to talk about doing how to put this, a body of work. You go do a body of work on meditation. Then maybe you go do a body of work around healing relationships. Or maybe you just go okay, and this might sound like a contradiction in terms, but maybe you go do a body of work on enjoying yourself and really figuring out how to enjoy your life. So what I want to say is, I think that there's room to go and do dedicated practice, and also, Matt, there's room to go and kind of get absorbed in enjoying your friendships. So,
Yeah.
like, what I'd say is be easygoing with yourself and appreciate everything that's arising. Am I speaking to your question, and are there more questions around that?
Yes, and I think that's ultimately like what you came to at the end was the thing that kind of helped me
Yeah.
come back, because uh I don't know, I came from like a pretty, not to get into it, but came from a pretty Christian background,
Uh
and
huh.
so I have a lot of like issues with, you know, me versus them type of mentality,
Oh. Uh huh.
or like always being watched, and the only way I could really come
Oh.
back was that that it's okay that that happened, and that I can take a little break, and
Yeah.
it's not going to kill me.
Yeah.
And I haven't had as serious as a practice as I had in the first 4 weeks. So
Yeah.
it could be natural for my body to be like, okay, you might need to take it easy for a little. You've been really focusing here. And then as
Right.
soon as I got something else to attach to, it was like, thank God. And then went to that. But the only way I could come back was like just kind of getting over it and not beating myself up about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's really also good to what we'll call vipassanize that beating yourself up. Vipassanize means like kind of come with like a deconstructing lens. Like look at the beating up behavior. Oh, here I am telling myself this story that I'm a piece of shit or whatever. It's like, and you know what? It's fine. It's like, aha, here we go. Here's me beating myself up. And then
Yeah,
here,
it wasn't even until like the end of when I left, when I came back, that I started beating myself up, and I didn't realize that until a few days into it. Like while I was hanging out with my friend, I was somewhat equanimous and
uh-huh.
just being like, oh, okay, like this is a really nice, just take advantage of this moment. You don't get
Yeah,
a lot of these moments with this friend anymore, so just enjoy
sure,
it. And that kind of took me away from it. And then when I got back, I was like, oh, now it's been 3 days or whatever since
sure.
you formally meditated. Can you get back on the horse? Blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, thank you.
Sure, sure, sure. Awesome, man. Sounds good. Okay, cool. So then let's move on to okay. Anastasia says, I have struggled with feel rest, but I'm getting through it and enjoy having some insights about myself. Okay, good, good. Like, yeah, for example, if you are anxious and if you're kind of really driven to always accomplish, this is just what's coming up for me. Like the feel rest practice can be really insightful and really can help broaden your repertoire of behaviors because that was really an issue for me is like restlessness, always feeling like I needed to do something productive. Okay, here Anastasia says, I also have one more common question. Do you have some tips for people who meditate together? Well, first off, it's absolutely super awesome that you do. And if you have somebody, it sounds like it might be a, your life partner or a romantic partner that you meditate with. That is so amazing. You are so lucky. Good on you. Um, like me and my partner did formal and walking meditation in the same room space, and it was joyful, especially metta. But it's fine to talk during walking meditation. I would recommend that you not talk during walking meditation, but I would strongly recommend that you keep meditating together. Like, strongly recommend. That is absolutely fantastic. Um, and then Arthur comments back to Chris. He says, Chris said, if you think you're enlightened, go visit your family for the weekend. Exactly. Arthur says, great quote, Chris. Taking care of my kid, taking care of a kid tests my meditation practice every day. But I guess meditation helps me a lot too, especially the background and informal practice. Yes, I really want to echo that. Like, the more you can integrate the meditative practice into your daily life, the more benefits will accrue to you, and the less suffering you will experience, and the less suffering those around you will experience. So, yep, good. All right. Why don't we just take one more question, if there is one? Anything else coming up for people? Okay. Let's assume not. All right. So we'll get into the main lecture. But you know what? Before we do, let's just meditate for like a few minutes just to settle in. Just straightening up the head, and letting everything settle. And let's do the feel rest practice. So this is a noting practice, so we notice what's happening. And we're looking for deactivation. We're looking for quiet, relaxation, tranquility, absence. notice the stillness that underlies activity. Noticing how activity or stimulation or events or arisings arise out of stillness, are actually made of stillness, and return back into stillness. And noticing the total openness, total restfulness of your experience. All right, good. We'll wrap that up. And let's try to carry that restfulness into the rest of the class. All right, and then Chris has one more comment here. This sounds silly, but is there an easy way to qualify our progress? We're so used to measuring all our self-improvement projects these days. Yeah, so let me speak to this. So firstly, I don't think it's silly in the least. I think it'd be silly not to try to figure out what kind of progress you're making. Now, you don't want to get attached to it, but this is, I think, one of the subtleties that's seen as the practice deepens, is that there is a place for, how to put this? There's a place for measuring and striving, and there's a place for like total surrender and letting everything collapse. So yeah, there's a place for measuring. So how do you measure progress? I think that there are many good answers to this, but these are just a few answers that come up for me. The one that comes foremost is that you want to look at how, and take like a long-term overarching perspective, not like a by the moment perspective, but like how kind are you? How at peace are you? Is there more compassion? Is there more insight? Whatever that means, we need to define that term. Is there more looseness around concepts? Is there more looseness around the idea of a self? Also, you can kind of look at the quality of the meditation, how much absorption there is. If there is absorption, it's kind of a sign of progress, kind of. But the problem is that if there's no absorption, or if the quality of the meditation seems like absolute shit, then that's also fine, actually. It doesn't, like, again, expecting the practice to be fun is like expecting strength training to feel good. It doesn't, it might feel good or it might not. And also, let me say this, you want to do everything you can to facilitate that the practice feel good, but you shouldn't be disheartened if it feels bad. So that's one metric. Another related is how are your interpersonal relationships? Are you at greater ease? Are you less punitive? Are you a little bit more fluent? I actually think another really interesting metric, and I'm drawing on the work of Peter Fonagy's. How is your epistemic trust? So epistemology means kind of knowing life, to know existence. So do you have trust in experience? Do you have trust? Do you have a general attitude of trust? Well, not do you have it, rather, is it growing? Do you have more trust towards others and experience than you did in the past? And so this quality of trusting and feeling and having this sense of kind of almost being held by the universe, is that growing? If it is, that's a really good sign. That's a very reliable sign that things are moving forward in your practice. But again, you can't look like by the day. Like one day, like for example, yesterday afternoon, I was in a bad mood and life seemed problematic. And you know what? That was just a blip. Everything's cool today. So, okay, those are some answers. Chris, is that speaking to your question? And is there more around that? Okay, good enough. Awesome, great. All right, so let's jump into today's material. So today is going to be a really like kind of loosey-goosey kind of class. We're just going to be talking about practice generally. But here we have Rory. He's made another comment. In my experience, any assessing progress can be unfruitful that takes up time when you are sitting. Yeah, I would agree. You don't want to be thinking about your practice when you're doing a formal practice. You would just want to note practice thought. Actually, maybe all of you should actually write that word down, practice thought. So you can always note the word practice thought. And there, if you note it, you're practicing and not, what's the word? Thinking. Okay, good. The analogy is what I like is that you can't cook a good cake by continually opening the door to check the temperature and the cake. It will only interfere with the baking process. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so check in with a teacher, check in with yourself, check in with spiritual friends, and talk about your practice, get a handle on it. But you don't want to perseverate about it.